Welcome back to another episode of SmoothBrainEDH, where we make the smoothest plays with the biggest brains. We're back again with more exciting Commander gameplay, so let's see what the Smooth Brain crew brought to the table this time. First up is Matt on Faldorn, Dreadwolf Herald. This Gruul deck is centered around playing cards from exile in order to gain card advantage and trigger Faldorn's ability in order to create an army of wolves to overrun Matt's opponents. He keeps a hand with a forest, a mountain, command tower, Sakura Tribe Elder, Urbrask, Heretic Praetor, Karlach, Fury of Avernus, and Ignite the Future. Next up is Logan on Alesha, who smiles at death. This Mardu deck is focused around filling the graveyard with powerful creatures with enter the battlefield effects, then recurs them with Alesha's ability. He starts the game with Shatter Sanctum, Graven Cairns, Spectator Seeding, Rakdos Signet, Solemn Simulacrum, Judith the Scourge Diva, and Farewell. Our third player today is Jason on Yorion, Sky Nomad. This Azorius deck is all about blinking permanents for value with Yorion's ability to overtake the game. His starting hand is an Island, Plains, Talisman of Progress, Cloudblazer, Muldrifter, Kiora Best the Sea God, and Counterspell. Last is Chandler on Xyris, the Writhing Storm. This teamer deck is focused around card draw, helping its opponents draw cards in order to create an army of snake tokens from Xyris. He opts to keep a hand with an Island, Windswept Heath, Tropical Island, Dockside Extortionist, Craterhoof Behemoth, Mana Drain, and Court of Calling. We're about to hop right into the game, but before that, go ahead and give us a like, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss any of our new content. We post new gameplay videos every week, so you don't want to miss it. Links to the Decklists, our social media, our Patreon, our podcast channel, and our public Discord server are in the description. Our channel is also partnered with DRAGONSHIELD, so if you're looking to pick up any new sleeves or magic-related products, check out our affiliate link in the description. Now, on to the gameplay.
Logan will start the game off with a Graven Cairns and then passes to Jason, who plays a basic island and then passes to Chandler. Chandler plays a Windswept Heath, which he immediately cracks for a Ketria Triumph, and he'll pass while searching. Now on Matt's turn, he plays Command Tower and then also passes, so we're back to Logan's turn, who will play Spectator Seeding his land for turn, and then we'll cast Rakdos Signet, then pass to Jason. Jason has a similar turn and plays a Plains, then a Talisman of Progress, and then passes. Chandler will just play Tropical Island and then pass to Matt. Matt plays Mountain, and then we'll tap for 2 to drop Sack Daddy. The turn is then passed to Logan, who plays Shattered Sanctum as land for turn, then we'll tap for 4 to cast Solemn Simulacrum, flying the Plains to the battlefield tapped, and he'll pass while searching. The turn is now Jason's, and he'll cast Muldrifter with its Evoke cost. It'll die when it enters, and he'll draw 2 cards. After this, he plays a Command Tower, and then we'll pass the turn to Chandler, who starts off with a Castle Embreth, and then we'll tap for 3 to cast Witty Roast Master. The turn is then passed to Matt, who stops on end step to sacrifice Sack Daddy, finding a mountain to the battlefield tapped, and then he'll move to his main phase, where he'll play a basic forest as land for turn, and then cast his commander, Faldorn. The turn is then passed to Logan, who immediately casts his commander, Alesha. After this, he'll move to combat and swing for 2 at Chandler, who just takes the 2 damage. On second main, Logan plays Valakut Stoneforge as land for turn, and then the turn is passed to Jason, who plays a basic island as land for turn, then we'll cast a Thought Vessel into a Skyclave Apparition. When it enters the battlefield, Jason puts a lot of thought in it and ultimately decides to exile Faldorn. The turn is then passed to Chandler, who will start off with a basic island as land for turn. He'll then tap for 2 to cast a Dockside Extortionist. It'll resolve, and there are 4 artifacts on the battlefield, so he'll make 4 treasure tokens. There's a Witty Roastmaster trigger, and then Chandler will move to combat and swing it at Matt. And then the turn will be passed to Matt, who will start off with a basic mountain as land for turn, and then will recast his commander, and then pass the turn to Logan. Logan will stop him on end step to cast a Cathartic Pyre. He chooses to discard Judith, the Scourge Diva, and Pitiless Plunderer, and then draws 2 cards. He'll then move to his turn and immediately go to combat, swinging Alesha at Matt and Solemn Simulacrum at Jason. Alesha will trigger, and Logan will pay the mana to return Judith to the battlefield, attacking Chandler. There are no blocks around the table, so everyone just takes their damage. On second main, Logan will drop Savai Triumph as land for turn, and then we'll pass to Jason. Jason will start off by tapping for 4 to cast Cloudblazer, drawing 2 cards and gaining 2 life when it enters the battlefield. After this, he'll play a Reliquary Tower as land for turn, and then just pass the turn to Chandler, who plays another basic island as land for turn, and then will tap for 5 to cast his commander, Xyris the Writhing Storm. When Jason receives priority, he's about to counter Xyris, but Chandler offers him a deal. If he gets to keep it, the first swing with Xyris will go at Jason, which will draw them both 3 cards, and Jason accepts, so Xyris resolves. Roastmaster trigger. After this, Chandler will move to combat and swings for 3 at Logan, and then we'll just pass the turn to Matt, who starts his turn off by tapping a mountain for red, then playing a Gruul Turf and bouncing that mountain back to his hand. He'll then tap for an additional 3 to cast Ignite the Future, exiling the top 3 cards of his library, and he's able to play those till the end of his next turn. The 3 exiled cards are Mizium Mortars, Containment Construct, and an Emerald Dragon. After this, the turn will be passed to Logan, who starts off with a Sundown Pass as land for turn, and then as an Alesha deck does, he moves to combat, swinging Alesha at Jason, and his Solemn Simulacrum at Matt. Alesha will then trigger, Logan will pay the mana, and he'll return Pitiless Plunder to the battlefield attacking Jason. Matt decides to just take the 3 damage, and Jason will take the 6. And then after this, the turn is passed to Jason, who starts off with an Ancient Tomb as land for turn, and then will tap for 5 mana to cast his commander, Yorion, and he'll take 2 damage to the tomb. When Yorion enters the battlefield, he'll exile the Blazer and the Skyclave Apparition. He'll then immediately move to end step, and they'll return to the battlefield. He'll exile Alesha with the Apparition, and then he'll draw 2 cards and gain 2 life. This will cause Chandler to make 2 snakes, which will trigger the Roastmaster twice as well. And so after that end step, the turn is passed to Chandler. Chandler will then immediately move to combat, and will swing Xyris at Jason to keep his part of the deal. Jason doesn't block, and so upon damage, he and Jason will both draw 3 cards, there will be 3 snake tokens created, and Witty Roastmaster will trigger 3 times. Post-combat, Chandler will play another basic island as land for turn, will then cast a Cryptolith Rite, and then just pass the turn to Matt. Matt will start his turn off by tapping his Gruul Turf and using the green mana to activate Faldorn. He'll discard a green slime to exile a Xenagos the Reveler. After this, he'll pay 6 mana to overload the exiled Mizium Mortars. He'll get a wolf token out of this. When priority hits Jason, he decides to Cloud Shift Yorion, blinking it, and then when it re-enters the battlefield, he'll exile his other creatures under Yorion. He also tapped his Talisman, so he'll take a damage, and the Talisman is also going to be exiled under Yorion. Chandler also decides to respond by using Cryptolith Rite to tap 4 of his non-summoning sick creatures to float 4 green mana. The Mortars will then resolve and a lot of creatures die. Logan gets 2 Plunderer triggers, 1 Solemn trigger, and 3 Judith triggers. He'll point the Judith triggers at Chandler's face, Xyris, and Yorion, and then he'll resolve drawing the card last so that Chandler doesn't get a snake. In response to the damage triggers, Chandler will tap for an additional 5 mana to cast a Chord of Calling X is equal to 6. Jason decides to Dopen's Veto it though, knowing that Chandler is going to get Seshiro so that Xyris will survive. Chandler decides to respond by mana draining his own Chord of Calling so that he'll have 9 colorless mana on his next pre-combat main phase. Damage will then go through, killing Xyris and Yorion, and then Matt will move to end step, and all of Jason's permanents will return. He'll gain 2 and draw 2, and then exile Chandler's Cryptolith Rite. And now the turn is Logan's. He'll start off by casting a Jeweled Lotus for free, and then he'll use it and 2 more mana to recast Alesha. After this, he'll cast an Arcane Signet, and then a Putrid Goblin, then pass the turn to Jason, who immediately moves to combat and swings for 2 at Logan in the air, and then 2 at Chandler. Then in post-combat, he'll tap for 7 mana, taking 2 to Ancient Tomb, and he'll recast Yorion, exiling the same targets. Chandler will also get a 2/2 illusion. After this, Jason will cast a Charming Prince, and if you don't know how this works, this puts Jason in a very good position. Charming Prince will enter the battlefield, and will exile Yorion. Jason will then move to his end step, and will resolve Yorion's return trigger first. ETB triggers will exile Logan's Goblin, and then he'll draw 2 cards and gain 2 life. He'll then return Yorion to the battlefield from the Charming Prince, and then will re-exile everything, including the Charming Prince. Now Logan will get a 2/2 illusion, and then Jason will pass the turn to Chandler, who on his upkeep will flash in a Dictative Crewfix, drawing him 2 cards on his draw step, then he'll get 9 mana on his first main phase. He'll then play a Scavenger Grounds as land for turn, and then float Teamer and use 4 of that colorless mana to cast Xyris the Writhing Storm. Jason, however, views Xyris as his biggest threat right now, so he decides to tap for 2 and counterspells it, and he will take a damage to his Talisman. After this, Chandler will cast a Skull Clamp and will pay the 1 mana to equip it to his 2/2. He then considers popping Scav Grounds, but ultimately decides not to, because if he makes another land drop next turn, he can attempt to recast Xyris. So he'll just move to combat and swing for 3 at Jason, hoping he'll block so he can draw 2 more cards. And that's exactly what happens. After this, Chandler will move to his end step, and Jason will return all his creatures to the battlefield. He gets a bunch of ETB triggers, and he'll start by exiling Alesha, then drawing 2 and gaining 2, and then exiling Yorion again. The turn will now be Matt's, and he'll draw 2 cards on his draw step, then play a forest as land for turn. He then attempts to go big, and flashes back Ignite the Future, exiling the 3 cards from the top of his library, and then getting to cast them for free. Unfortunately though, the only things he exiles are an Embereth Shieldbreaker and 2 basic lands. He'll cast the Adventure side of Embereth Shieldbreaker for free, destroying Jason's Talisman, and he'll get a 2/2 from this. Matt will then move to combat and swing for 5 at Jason, who doesn't want to risk losing any of his creatures, so he just takes the 5 damage. After this, Matt moves to end step, Yorion will come back and exile all the other creatures. The turn is now Logan's, and he'll draw the 2 cards on his draw step. He'll then start off with a Luxury Suite as land for turn. He'll then tap for 7 mana and cast a Ruinous Ultimatum, destroying all of his opponent's non-land permanents. He'll then move to combat and swing for 2 at Jason, and then he'll move to his end step where Jason gets his exiled creatures back. He'll exile Logan's Arcane Signet, then scry 2, then draw 2 and gain 2. Logan will respond by using his mana to channel Ataka Numa, milling 3 cards and returning Solemn Simulacrum to his hand, and then all of Jason's triggers will go through. The turn is now Jason's, and he'll start off with a basic Plains. He'll then tap for 4 and cast a Panharmonicon, taking 2 to his Ancient Tomb. After this, he'll cast a Cloud of Fairies, which will let him untap 4 lands. With the first trigger, he'll untap Ancient Tomb and a basic, and then in response to the second one, he'll tap Ancient Tomb for 2 mana and take 2 damage. He'll then repeat the process, untapping a basic and Ancient Tomb. He'll then retap Ancient Tomb and then float another blue to cast Mnemonic Wall. He'll return Cloud Shift and Counterspell back to his hand, making Chandler regret not popping that Scav Grounds. He'll then move to combat and swing for 6 at Chandler, who has no choice but to just take it. Now in a second main, Jason will drop a Felidar Guardian, Flickering Cloud of Fairies, and Charming Prince when it enters the battlefield. He'll start their ETB triggers by untapping 4 lands, and then the Charming Prince will exile the Felidar Guardian and the Mnemonic Wall. And with that, we are officially at the point of the game where Jason can repeatedly flicker things every turn to always have mana open and always have a counterspell open on everyone's turn. The rest of the table asks around to see if anybody has any answers that could help them get out of this situation, but unfortunately nobody does. And then after finding out that Jason has 20 cards in hand, the rest of the table decides to just concede, and Jason is the winner of this week's video. Well everyone, there you have it. Not only was Jason able to absolutely dominate the board presence there at the end of the game, but he was also able to ensure none of his opponents could make it back into the game by the time he won. Let us know what you thought about this game in the comments down below. And while you're down there, be sure to check out all the deck lists and all the other links we have down there. We've got extra content, Patreon where you can support us. There's a whole lot down there. Just be sure to check it out. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already as well. But that's it for this video, you guys. Have a smooth day.